Hello, good early afternoon, or whenever you're watching this. You could be watching this at night, in the morning. So, this topic is super important, and I have learned about this, obviously, the hard way. So hopefully, I am certain. I am certain everybody who hears this video, who watches this video, will be able to relate to this video, because I don't know anyone who hasn't felt this at certain points in their life and then don't understand what happens, the after effects of what happens. So what I'm talking about now topic is over-adrenalized states. So over-adrenalized states can feel almost like a high, right? However, you might often, maybe people don't even understand what this is, but over-adrenalized states we would feel in some sort of big tragedy. So not always, but in order to explain this in a way that I feel like everyone will understand, take that breakup that you had. That was the worst, most horrific, horrible breakup that broke your heart. And think about how you couldn't eat and you couldn't sleep for that period of time, okay? That is your adrenals. So your body has gone through this sort of shock or this trauma. Let's take a death in the family, someone close to you, an accident. Thank God, knock on wood, I have not broken a bone, but I would imagine that a lot of people have this when they have some sort of, maybe even a car accident, something like that. And actually in the hospital, they would give you, if you had like a broken leg or you had something happen, they often give like cortisone shots. That's cortisol to help take your adrenals down, actually, for the inflammation. So that it actually does work on the adrenals in some capacity, which is really interesting to me. So these over-adrenalized states is your adrenaline firing off because you're in a survival state. Now, some of us with early childhood trauma or, some other past trauma that's happened are living in a bit of an over-adrenalized state as a constant chronic thing, because it was never safe for us to actually be just in a normal parasympathetic flow. We had to always be doing and doing and doing and doing in order to validate ourselves, in order to create safety in our environment. Maybe we had parents who were dysregulated who had that pattern, and they, we imprinted that pattern onto ourselves and our lifestyle as a means to seek approval and, again, for validation and even for love, right? As a little one, you might feel like I have to be a certain way to receive love, because when I don't do X, Y, and Z, I get yelled at or I get criticized or I get maybe even something worse, and then it's not safe. So I have to do this, this, and this. So then you're always in an over-adrenalized state. And actually to come down from that feels quite uncomfortable. That's why a lot of people do not know what it feels like to be in a true rest and digest state. For the sake of this video, so there's always a spectrum kind of I want to say to everything of like what, somebody's dealing with. I would say most people have some sort of dysregulation that they're dealing with. A lot of my clients with chronic illness and autoimmune and chronic symptoms, fatigue, chronic pain, mainly, aches and pains and joint pain and things like that. Chronic fatigue, insomnia, anxiety. Those are the main things. Depression. Those are the main symptoms that I see and that I deal with and that existed for me, along with some other neurological symptoms as well. With those people, there's an underlying chronic thing going on. But then when you throw on top of it a breakup or a death or whatever, it sends them into a state of so much adrenalization that they lose weight. They can't eat. They don't sleep for like a long period of time. They have to take like Xanax or something like that to like get themselves to sleep at all. So when we talk about these over-adrenalized states, the point that I want to make in this video is that, first of all, even though it might not feel like it at the time, your system will come down to some, even if your baseline is still slightly over-adrenalized, you'll go back to where your baseline is. Now, to do when it's a like an acute situation that's happened, like a breakup or a death or grieving of some, I feel like loss is really when our bodies, but actually that's not true. When we get into relationship, we find ourselves over adrenalized. I have friends, and I have been in this space myself, new relationships, right? So even, or you're getting wet, or you're getting married, or your child is going off to college, right? Or graduating from high school or something. I mean, I don't have a kid that's going through that yet, but maybe they themselves, right? They're graduating. They're in an over-adrenalized state. They aren't sleeping well. They're too excited. My daughter was going on a field trip to the beach with her friends and her school, actually her class, and she was so excited. She like woke up early that morning, like, really early. I was like, you need to sleep more. She's like, I'm so excited, right? These are kind of like these temporary periods of like where we're over-adrenalized. What I want to make clear in this video is that when you find yourself in that state, what I have found very helpful, and what I do for myself and my kids and what I teach to my clients, is it's important to try to have a handle on the energy output that is happening. Now, especially with my clients who are dealing with chronic things, they're already sort of at their limit for energy output because of the chronic dysregulation that's in the system already currently underlying. So when you throw on another thing to that, and this could be a protocol, by the way. People get in over-adrenalized states when they're starting a new protocol. They're fasting, okay? They're like, I'm going to do a water fast. This is an over-adrenalized state. That's something that's controllable. That's why I don't recommend doing those things, because what happens after is we come down. So just taking the example of my daughter, when she went to Jekyll, she was probably adrenalized the whole trip. And she told me about it. I was so excited. I was so happy. It took me a while to get to sleep, all that stuff. Now, I don't want her to not experience that. I want her to she's a kid. I want her to, she's not dealing with who was really dealing with like really chronic stuff at the time. So I wanted her to be in that and be joyous and be happy and be excited. And this is activation that actually can be quite healthy, right? But what I noticed and what I observe and what I want everybody to be aware of is that there is a come down that happens after the event, or after, that we kind of like, so when she came back home, she was really down, really down. I also see it in my kids after they've been with their dad for a week, because he has a ton of energy and they do a ton when they're with him. When they come back to me, I can tell their systems are going back, kind of coming down, and goes down a little farther before it kind of comes back up into this sort of regulated state. And so this video is especially for those of you who are dealing with chronic fatigue and insomnia and things like that are, again, chronic. If you are finding that you're getting into these adrenalized states often and you don't understand why, this happens all the time. Why I felt so good when I was doing XYZ. I felt so good when I was da 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 da. Well, pay attention. Did you feel so good because you were over adrenalized and because you were in this a little bit of kind of a high? And then what I always hear is, I felt so good when I did XYZ. I felt so good when this and this and this and this happened. Or I lost I hear this too. They've gone through a death. They've gone through some sort of loss, but I'm doing great. I feel totally fine, right? It's that adrenalized thing that kicks in. It's a survival response to get you through. And then what I hear is, and then I didn't feel good. Then I went through weeks where I felt horrible, and I don't understand. Why did I have a flare when I thought I was doing great and I thought I felt great and I was feeling so good for this period of time? I thought I was smooth sailing, and then all of a sudden I had this massive flare where I had chronic fatigue and I had joint pain and everything. It's because when you were over adrenalized, you did too much. And it's because you got into that over-adrenalized state. Again, we can't always control, right? Sometimes we have to allow our bodies to be in that over-adrenalized state to feel what's happening. Sometimes we need to express some of that energy out by working out, by doing something active, right? But what I tell my clients is really have your finger on it. Right? Understand, have the awareness around what's going on, that I'm actually in a lot of activation right now. And at the end of this, I might actually feel a dip. So that first of all, it helps to prepare mentally and maybe even physically if we have to for that. It sets us up so that we have a gauge on what's happening in the body, and that your body has not taken a step backwards. It's not failing you in any way. I always want to make sure I say these things in these videos because your body's actually kicking into survival stress because it thinks that that's what's supposed to do, right? But it also has to restore and has to come back down. And if it's too over-adrenalized for too long, it will come down in this sort of crash that we tend to feel on the outside, on the end of that sort of rush high. So I say this to say there are situations where over-adrenalized states are a choice. And we're putting ourselves in there, like I was saying with a fast, with overworking out. I see this all the time. Well, I felt really good on these days, so I went really hard on a workout, and then I don't understand because then I felt horrible and had a massive flare. It's because you did too much, right? So when you find yourself over-adrenalized, I'm not saying don't get some energy out. That piece is important too. But you might have to also make yourself rest. You might also have to make yourself really take note of your body, of your surroundings, pause throughout the day, really get in touch with those felt senses like I always talk about. And okay, I'm in an over-adrenalized state right now. I know I need to express some energy, and that's good because I'm really feeling that. I also need to make sure I'm sitting when I'm eating. I also need to make sure I'm eating. I also need to make sure I'm eating often. I need to make sure I'm just pausing, noticing what's happening. And I need to make sure that I'm aware that this state is going to, at some point, likely, I'm going to come down from that because usually it's temporary. And I mean, I'm all the time. I think it's those types of things. What I'm specifically talking about right now is temporary. And I might have a dip. And how do I need to maybe even plan for that or prevent that from happening? Because that is possible. So I was able to prevent a lot of flares in the beginning of my nervous system work by simply understanding better what my capacity was when I had energy. So we can have a false sense of greater capacity when we're in these over-adrenalized states that give us a sense and a feeling that we are able to do and handle, and our bodies can do more than they actually can. And so I started to take a step back. Even though I felt like my body could do it at the time, it was over-adrenalized. It was a false sense of capacity. I started to really observe how I was going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down so much. So when I was really up, I just took the gas off a little bit. And when I just took the gas off a little bit, those dips weren't quite as severe. Does that make sense? So that is what I wanted to explain in this video. There's obviously so much I can talk about in terms of, healing this sort of gas on, brake on stuff that most of us who have chronic symptoms and nervous system dysregulation have. But I like to make these videos short and sweet, and I hope that you guys understand this concept and that you can start to apply it to your lives a little bit and start to play with, okay, when do I need to work with this energy and get some stuff out? And when do I actually need to try to just, like I said, take the gas off a little bit? Maybe I go for that run today, but instead of doing 3 miles, I do 1. Or maybe instead of running today, I go for a walk, right? I'm still getting energy out. I'm still moving. I'm still working with what I have a little bit, but I'm not going to do so much that I'm finding myself in a state of chronic symptoms in a few days or a few weeks or whatever it might be. Okay. Over-adrenalized states 101. Hope this finds you well, and that you can apply it to your own life. And if you have questions or comments, please leave them below, and like this video and share it if you liked it. Thanks, guys. Bye.